Hello, welcome to another Gender in Focus episode. My name is Elle, and I'm here, as always, with the president of Transfocus, Kai Scott. How are you doing?
Hello, I'm doing well.
I feel like I need to give you a title there.
Yeah, it's better than what was the other one? King of Washrooms or something like that.
Oh, Washroom King, yeah.
All right, I'll take this one above that one.
Fair enough. How are you?
I'm doing well. How about yourself?
I'm doing so well. It is, we're recording this on May 29th, and it is too hot to be May. So
True.
I'm not built for this, so I'm struggling a bit, but I'm doing okay.
Right. Making your way through the heat. Yeah, unexpected, like I won't say heat wave. I'll put that in quotation marks, but hotter than usual for sure.
I know. When I came to Canada, I was thinking, yes, I'm going to go to the land of polar bears. I didn't think tropical weather in May.
Well, global warming does funny things.
True. Okay. Well, anyway, today we're talking about a really interesting topic, actually, and one that could potentially be a little difficult for some people, particularly trans and non-binary people, actually, because it involves the way that trans and non-binary expressions or experiences can be monitored, or folks are being told to tone things down, or that they're too much or too colorful, or just too much going on. And it shows up all the time when talking to cisgender people, but it does actually show up quite a lot when we're talking within our own community as well. And that's what we're going to be talking about, the nuances that comes with these sorts of topics. So Kai, people are I'm feeling hesitant already. People are really hesitant to talk about this within the community because there is so much pressure to make sure it seems as though we're all united. And so before we kind of dive in, I was wondering if you could start there, that what is it about this topic that makes it so hard to address?
Yeah, I can imagine for some people listening, this is a bit of a plot twist, because maybe for some cisgender folks who are listening, we kind of see the community as one, unified, all on the same page, doing the same thing. But in fact, there's a lot of diversity, not just of experience and identity, but also opinions about how we should be as well, right?
Right.
And that's where, based on experience or even how we see the world, people could be nervous about how some trans and non-binary folks show up. That could be, in the way they've decided to how they're going to dress, maybe or express themselves might be different from societal expectations for that particular gender. It could be that they're not going to be quiet when something is the matter and are going to point it out in various ways that shows up. It could be somebody being, too much of one thing or the other, feminine, masculine, but it kind of all boils down to don't be yourself, right?
Right.
In ways that are authentic to that person, no matter if it aligns with society or it doesn't. And so there can be this monitoring that happens within trans and non-binary communities, and it expresses itself in digital form, online commentary, but it also can be subtle moments between trans people in person where they say, I wouldn't do that, right?
Right.
And I appreciate why it is, and we can get into that a little bit later. But I'm not saying that it's not completely understandable, but I think this is important to explore, not just for trans and non-binary folks to talk about, but also cisgender people to be aware of, so that we're not painting the whole community as one and perhaps only listening to one individual who might be trying to kind of constrain the community in ways that are not helpful for everybody or has unrealistic expectations of certain trans and non-binary folks. So just kind of putting it out there so we can have a constructive conversation about this in terms of what we can do, no matter if we're cis or trans.
I think you just said something really important there, that this idea that there is no such thing as one trans perspective on things, and that if you kind of take some education or learning or just listening to one trans person, that doesn't mean you now understand trans people as a group. And so I guess I wanted to ask you to sort of dive into that a little bit further, and what that looks like in terms of just, individuals, but also what that looks like in terms of organizations and planning for that nuance.
Yeah. I think for cisgender folks who are just starting on their journey of understanding, they might see trans as one thing, when in fact it's actually an umbrella term for quite a range of different identities. And they all have different needs and different things they're doing and decisions people are making, and both from an individual but also as part of that group of people. So we have, most people think, when they think of trans, they think of trans men and women, so the binary aspects of those identities. That's probably the most visible to most folks. But there's also those who are beyond that binary, so non binary folks, gender fluid folks, people who don't use any pronouns. So there's a lot going on underneath this broad umbrella. And sometimes organizations just listen to one individual and say it's a trans woman, which is really important. And we do need to listen to trans individuals, but they're largely going to be speaking from their experience. What are their pain points? What are they upset about? What are they identifying as ways forward? And they might actually have opinions about the other part of the spectrum or the community, right? And some of those are informed and others are not as informed. And so it's really important for the cisgender folks in organizations who are listening to trans individuals to understand that context, that we can listen to people's personal experience, but they may not be able to span the full spectrum in terms of what other solutions are needed, and they might be misinformed about other aspects of the spectrum, right? So especially trans binary folks, not to call out my own people as a trans man, but we can sometimes have ill-informed thoughts, opinions, perspectives on non-binary folks that we are spouting in a workplace context that makes it more difficult for non-binary folks, as an example, right? And so I think that's where, rather than organizations asking, what do trans people need? It's, what are the ranges of things we can set up in an organization so that a range of needs can be handled well?
Right.
Yeah. So those are some of the shifts.
That makes sense. And we actually had a really good example of this. I think it was, well, by the time this goes out, it will be last month. But on social media, we had an episode go out that was talking about the discourse around trans people being born in the wrong body, and how the majority of trans people really don't align with that phrasing. And I'll link that in the show notes. You can check that out. But when we shared that, we did get some pushback on this because, as we've said, trans people are not a monolith, and that there are a whole range of different experiences and opinions on that. And I was wondering if you could kind of go into that a little bit, just as an example of what that looks like.
Yeah, well, when it comes to how we describe our experience under this broad umbrella of trans and non-binary folks, we were trying to show that the kind of narrative which we see in the media a lot is born in the wrong body, and how that wasn't applicable to everyone under this broad umbrella. But then people for whom it does describe their experience, they got nervous, right? Thinking that we're trying to say, don't use this at all, when individuals can use it for themselves, but not to force it on others, right? And
Right.
so it's just these nuances that can then, get into a bit of a kind of back and forth tension point, when when we kind of just recognize that everybody has a different experience and not one part of the spectrum represents everybody, we can have a much smoother way through. And it's not to say that individuals for whom that resonates, they can't say that, they should. But then not to say this is how everybody else does it as well. So to overrepresent what is at play, right? And that can happen, just to be like, my way of describing it is the true way, when that's not really at play. So there's a bit of nuance there. I think sometimes people think too, with that kind of pushback on the born in the wrong body, is that people, that's a that's their effective way of describing to be able to get what they need, right?
Right.
Because it's a very complicated medical system, and you have to jump through a lot of hoops, and you try to find efficient ways. So I do get why people like this way of describing. But then unfortunately it sets up, if that's the only way that people think about trans folks, then we're over focused on the body, and not everybody's changing their bodies and whatnot. So yeah,
Right.
those are a few of the dynamics at play. Yeah.
So even we get the pushback.
Mm-hmm.
And that's hard though, then that kind of must be quite difficult for an organization, because we had the pushback, but we're pretty equipped to handle it. But if
Right.
you're an organization and you're trying your best and you're not too sure, but then you think you've done the right thing and it turns out you've pissed off a whole other group of trans people, it
Yeah.
must be really, you can see where the nerves come into play when it
Mm-hmm.
comes to figuring this stuff out.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why we conduct kind of thoughtful and thorough processes, not so much to say we're going to find the right way, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's more that there's enough exploration of the people involved who are going to implement this to say, okay, we understand, here are the options, here's what fits within our budget, our timelines, our systems, and what our people need, and this is what we can't do. And then also being able to explain that, because it's fine not to do something, right? Whatever that
Mm-hmm.
is. But then it's, how do you explain that to people who might not agree with not doing something, you know? And that's the
Mm-hmm.
kicker. And having confidence in being like, okay, we might get people coming to us with pushback or not agreeing, and that's okay. That's their prerogative. They can tell us that, and we can respond in this way that we've prepared, and we're not flustered or caught off guard.
Mm-hmm. For sure. I really want to go on then to talk about policing within the
Mm,
community, the way that that
mhm,
shows up. Because what we might often hear, and actually what we have heard, or what we've seen in our own comment section and the comment sections of other people's social media, is this sort of, when somebody implies that by expressing yourself in the way that you want to express yourself as a trans or
uh-huh,
non-binary person, that you're making things harder for the rest of
mm,
us. Especially if it's a real, I don't know. I'll give you an example of something that I saw recently, which was of a trans man who had not had top surgery and was
mm,
wearing a more feminine presenting, sort of more feminine coded outfit, and saying,
mhm.
even though I'm wearing this, I'm still a trans man. And the comment section was
Oof.
filled with, you're making this so difficult. Like, what do you
Mm,
expect that
hmm.
if you're going to get pushback? Like, you're making things so hard for the rest of us. And we've
Yeah.
had this, the same in our own comment section too. And so I really want to hear you kind of go into who it is exactly that ends up being talked about in this way, and what's going on with that.
Mm, mhm. And what a great example to anchor in. Obviously, there's so many more, but it, yeah, it's almost like people are saying to that person, "You brought this upon yourself," right?
Right.
Any difficulty that that person experiences, then it's victim blaming, right?
For sure.
Um, and one thing to note for those who are not a part of this trans or non-binary community is that this is a really tough time, and there's a lot of
Mm-hmm.
pressure on the community. There's a lot that's going wrong, and it's that kind of situation or condition that brings this to the fore even more, kind of pours gasoline on a fire in terms of people policing, because
Mm-hmm.
at the bottom of it is really a fear of backlash, seeing
Right.
bunch of backlash, and then being like,
Mm-hmm.
we don't need any more, it's damage control. And if you connect with your own fear on other topics, control can be a part of that response. So it's not even that people are necessarily being malicious, although they can be. There is this, we gotta, what can we control? I don't know if I can control the people outside who are misunderstanding the community or, hostile towards the community, but I can control people in my community. And so kind of figuring out that control and then just hyper focusing on anybody that stands out in any way from
Right.
societal expectation. And the common message is like, hey, tone it down. We got to be reasonable. We can't look odd. Don't rock the boat, right? All the common
Yeah.
things. And of course, this is not just trans and non-binary communities. This is pretty much any marginalized community has this dynamic at play,
Hmm.
where there are
Hmm.
some who take it upon themselves, usually based on fear, to then micromanage others in their midst. And
Hmm.
then really, um, that's a understandable difficult situation for organizations, because of course you don't want to blame or shame the person who's doing that, but we also don't want to absorb all of that either,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
So it is a careful, nuanced balancing act. One thing I would offer as a reframe from thinking about controlling people in our community is, in unfortunately, kind of lining up with society and playing along, if you will,
Hmm.
doesn't actually create safety long term.
Hmm.
Maybe in the moment it does, and you get somebody off your back, and you can kind of be safe and huddle quietly away from the eye or the gaze of society. But
Hmm.
long term, it actually just means that the people who need safety the most are most at risk. They kind
Right.
of take on that risk for the whole community. And long term, that has huge mental and physical impacts on them in the terms of their health. And
Hmm.
so there are other ways to be safe, and I think those need to be discussed as a community and advanced. But controlling people who are quote too much, or being quote unquote odd according to society, that's not going to get
Hmm.
us really far.
No, for sure. And holding them responsible for cis people's reactions,
Hmm.
putting it on trans and non-binary people, it's so tough to handle. And but there is something really understandable about that fear. No, like
Hmm.
acceptance already feels so fragile.
Yeah,
I can see why difference might start to feel super risky.
yeah, it's
And
frightening.
it's very like terrifying place to be when you're seeing
Yeah,
all of this going on around the world.
yeah, yeah. And to have compassion for that person, or at least I do, and
For
invite
sure.
others
Yeah.
to do the same, not to excuse what they're doing, but more so that this person is not likely just controlling others around them, they're controlling themselves.
Hmm.
So, what are they barring themselves from that they would like to have access to? Either
Hmm.
small or big things, right? And so it's very unfortunate. And that, of course, shows up in cisgender people too, right? So,
Absolutely. Yeah.
but yeah, so I do have compassion for folks who do that, even if I'm not
Hmm.
agreeing with their actions or words.
One of the things that we see a fair amount of, whether again in our own comment section or in other people's, is this idea that there are bigger issues to handle, and we've seen this quite a lot. In we might be talking about I don't know, using the right pronouns, and someone will say, oh yes, that's a good, people are dying, but let's focus on pronouns.
Mm, mhm,
And that can be cis people and it can be trans and non-binary people. Another one might be another one that I saw on our own was I think we were talking about why we should hire trans people as leaders, and it's like, oh right, yeah, this is the important thing. We shouldn't, doesn't matter that we're losing all our rights in the States, but yeah, let's make sure
mhm.
someone's in middle management, you know. Something like
Right.
that. And it's this real dismissal, and that's so um I mean, first of all, that's true of literally any problem.
Yeah.
There's always something that's, I don't know, more important than something else. And
Mm,
it doesn't mean that we shouldn't talk about it. So I was wondering if you could go into that and where that comes from. Why is that such a
mm,
thing?
mhm. Yeah, no kidding. I mean, yeah, you're right. So many good examples from social media and just conversations, I've been a part of, I'm sure you've been a part of, where that
Hmm.
comes up, where it's like, this matter that we're talking about at the moment just gets kind of, tossed off to the side. Like, we should be only talking about X, Y, and Z and no other
Right.
things, as if we can't hold two or more things at once. Some of us really like multitasking.
You can speak for yourself on that one, but
Oh,
yes.
okay, fair.
But no, it's
Um,
true.
yeah, but yeah, where this comes from is that in our community and others, there is a hierarchy of suffering. And this is something that some people set up as a way to say, this is more important than that. And,
Mm,
or we only focus on these things and not others. It's usually pretty vague and
mm,
either individually understood or maybe among a few collective folks together, they understand the same thing. But and it sometimes changes too. I've observed that where I'm like, oh,
mm.
that's interesting. That's different from the last time we talked.
Right.
But often, what you see if you dig a little bit deeper is that um, we want to appreciate that people have experienced these things, right?
Hmm.
That they're bringing up, and that there's real pain behind those, right?
Yeah,
And so I think it's at least for me, I try to handle those very in a very sensitive way,
for sure.
because yes, that is whatever that's raised, whether that's a personal experience or not, or something they've heard from others, that is an important thing. And we don't need to drop the other thing that we're talking about either. I
Hmm.
think sometimes people struggle between what's this kind of system level urgency that we need to focus on and collectively work on as part of community or with organizational support, and what's kind of interpersonal dignity. And
Right.
both levels are super, super important. Right?
Hmm.
If we ignore the interpersonal dignity level and only focus on the systemic stuff, we'll get a bunch of people who won't be able to enjoy the systemic successes because they're going to be, not having a great mental health or physical health
Hmm.
because their dignity has been worn down over time. Now, if we only focus on interpersonal dignity without the systemic stuff, we won't get anywhere, right?
Right.
So
Yeah.
I think we would invite us to think about both levels, and maybe we focus more or less on one or the other, right? It can be dynamic.
Mm.
But I want to hold both in frame. And maybe
Right.
somebody has interest only in interpersonal dignity. Cool. Then go forth and make that happen.
Do your thing.
Yeah, exactly. Like we don't have to have everybody working on the same thing in the same way either.
Mm,
But as a whole community, I hope we can hold both,
for sure.
so that we can fight the big structural battles and get the small daily interactions right as well. So both at the same time.
And so often those things feed into each other. The
Yeah.
small everyday things are being added into the sort of wider tapestry of
Mm,
the lack of inclusion for trans and non-binary people. And so
mm,
we can tackle them at the same time. And I actually wanted to ask you a little bit further about this with regards to what is it that people are missing when they treat things like names or pronouns or certain language or how someone is spoken about, treating those things as just small, insignificant things. What it is we're actually missing with that.
Yeah. Well, a few things. Sometimes when people think about these types of efforts, especially if they're unfamiliar or new to that person, they think about, oh, it's so complex and why do I have to do this extra stuff? We never had to do this before, yada, yada,
Mm,
yada.
yeah.
When actually it doesn't take that much extra effort. I mean, sure, there might be a little practice to begin with, depending on what it is and how long you've known that person, etc. But
Hmm.
really, we're not talking about anything super duper intensive, you
Right.
know? And so,
Yeah.
why not do something small to help somebody and support somebody that actually makes a big difference over time, especially in contrast to what might be happening with other people? They
Right.
have like kind of a constant struggle with others, but with you, it's really lovely and what a fresh breath of air. So we can make a big difference in people's lives for relatively low cost, so to speak,
Mm.
right? From in terms of
Mhm.
effort. And just because something is low effort doesn't actually mean that it has low importance. I think sometimes people
Mhm.
equate that. They're like, oh, what's the big deal that I did this?
Right.
I'm like,
Yeah.
no, this is a freaking big deal. That person will remember. Like, we hear so many stories from trans and non binary folks, and they're like, this one time, this person did this very subtle thing, and I'm still thinking about it 10 years later, right?
Mhm.
Like,
Mhm.
that's a big deal. And
For sure.
so go for those things, and they're not that big of a deal for you, but they are for the other person. And then
Mhm.
uh, certainly within organizations, there are bigger issues that they can focus on and delve into, and certainly have likely more resources to do so, and
Mhm.
that also have broader benefit beyond trans and non-binary folks. So yeah, those are just some additional things that are kind of behind that common misconception.
I want to go on to talk about non-binary people
Hmm.
here because we're obviously the most important part of this conversation.
Clearly.
But no, because there is just a little bit more pushback when it comes to non-binary people, if that's the right way of putting it. And
Mhm.
so I kind of wanted to ask you about whether non-binary people can be sort of become the pressure point for this, like
Hmm.
that's the place where, like, and you mentioned this at the beginning, where even some trans people will say, like, okay, but that's too far, like
Mhm.
you're either a man or you're a woman. And
Yeah.
so I kind of wanted you to go into that. It becomes really complex when non-binary people are involved.
Yes. It's because there's a lot of things happening here, but this is something that is really kind of a big dynamic in the trans and non-binary community.
Mm,
Um, and what people are afraid of when they're saying these kinds of things under the broader banner of this is too much, right? These are all examples, but this is a very prominent one, is w- that we're worried that supportive people have a limit.
mm,
And we're
right.
worried that they're going to say, this is too complicated now.
Mm,
Why aren't you just fitting in? Like, what are you doing here? Like this kind of
mhm,
commentary. Or they, even trans binary folks can feel that themselves, right? It's not just
right.
about
Yeah.
cisgender folks, and basically the message there is you're a burden, you're taking up too much space, you're demanding too much, on and on and on.
Hmm.
And it puts this immense pressure on non-binary folks who it takes so much just to even get to understanding oneself, right?
Hmm.
Much less than to share that with others.
Hmm.
And then to constantly be figuring out how to be in the world, how to bring it up with people who are unfortunately making assumptions, and
Hmm.
that either require a correction or, depending on the situation, you just let it go. But it's like constant calculus. It's so much effort. And not because non-binary is something complicated. It isn't, because we know that because kids often have no time, no struggle with this, right? If
Hmm.
you tell them. I mean, that's not the only test, but
For sure.
it's not something complicated. But I think what is helpful to acknowledge that it is something unfamiliar to people.
Hmm.
Um, and just because something's unfamiliar doesn't actually mean it's complicated. It might look that way at first glance, but once you start to kind of get into it and really look at it and be with somebody and try, you start to see it's not actually a burden. It's this opportunity to understand and expand one's emotional intelligence, social flexibility. It really allows people to exercise a muscle that we don't get to a lot, because in our society we kind of box people and categorize them, and everybody's kind of in a
Hmm.
nice neat bundle that never moves. And then to really look and actually understand somebody is a big deal and a huge gift. And so Yeah, but it does require to kind of wrestle with the discomfort of unfamiliarity to begin with. It doesn't stay
Mm-hmm.
that way. But so those are some of the things that I hope in kind of talking it through, we can get to the other side of, at least within the community, possibly even for cisgender folks who want to be allies. But this is a particularly unique thing among non-binary folks.
I think there's that kind of dynamic between I don't understand this yet and this person is asking for too much, and that
Mm,
those two things are not that just because you don't understand something doesn't mean that the person is asking for too much. And we actually had this in one of our comments sections on the episode about no pronouns, where some people will
right.
go by she, her, they, them, he, him, and a whole mix of others. But some people prefer to have no pronouns at all and just
Mhm.
use their name. And we were discussing that, and I was saying how I can feel that that would be something that maybe I would like, but I hold back on that
Mm,
because I don't want to make things too difficult, like too hard for people,
yeah.
which is not a good reason to not do that.
Mm,
And in the comment section of that specific clip, there were trans people saying, "This is too much. Like
mm,
you're asking for too much. You're going to make things difficult for everybody else by asking for that." And it was such a once I got my own ego out the way, it was such a clear um, I'm so scared. Like that to me, that
mm,
person was just so afraid of what that will mean when we make things complicated. When it's
mm,
not complicated, it's just
mm.
um, not what people expect.
Yeah.
But it's ultimately all of that comes down to the fear of what might happen if
Mhm.
we accept that people are a bit more complex than we originally thought.
There's stuff happening for somebody who is dismissing, whether it's on this topic or pretty much any other, really.
Yeah.
There are parallels for sure, even if there's kind of unique specific aspects here. It's like people are trying to, as best they can, to kind of keep acceptance in place, but they feel it's very fragile. So
Mm.
then we got to really keep on top of all the things that, risk that in any way. And difference being a very obvious one. I think we're very visual, very auditory, for those who have these capabilities, um, people. And so as
Mm-hmm.
a result, that's a very easy thing to kind of hone in on and be like, stop it.
Mm-hmm.
Don't rock the boat. This is not that important. So minimizing, which what we talked
Mm-hmm.
about just recently, and then policing, controlling somebody. Yeah, that's a way to maintain what is considered to be a fragile acceptance. And right now, the truth is that acceptance is fragile. Right?
For sure. Yeah.
People are leaving the support. I don't know if it was they didn't really understand what kind of support they were providing and now disagree with that support, or I mean, there's a lot to that
Mm-hmm.
changing landscape. But if you feel like you're in quicksand, you're going to fight as hard as possible to, get to secure land, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
As an analogy. And that can involve other folks. The other thing, in terms of, especially if we're asking for too much, piece, is that we're often thinking about things in the abstract. Many people don't actually know a trans or non-binary person, and so it's really easy to be like, "Oh yeah, I don't get this," and so I think it's going to be hard,
I was, yeah, I was going
right?
to ask you about this because it's so true.
Yeah,
This sort of fire that's coming against the trans and non-binary communities are so abstract because most
mm,
people have no idea. They've never met
no,
a trans person that they know of. And
yeah,
so I'm so fascinated by that, like this sort of flame that's been what's the phrase where it's been made bigger,
ignited.
ignited,
Oh,
yes.
yeah,
uh, it's so different to the way people would actually converse if they had a trans person in front of them or a non-binary
mhm,
person in front of them. And I wanted to ask you specifically about that, and why does something like uh, non-binary people or no pronouns, or something that it's even smaller, the community is even smaller than trans people as a whole, why I'm feeling like there's sort of cis people turning in on trans and non-binary people, trans and non-binary people are turning in amongst themselves, and it's all the
Mm.
same thing.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Right? Yeah. And you're right that it's people thinking in the abstract about some fictitious person because they don't have somebody they know and can map all kinds of things that don't get challenged. Like
Right.
when you're in a relationship with somebody actual in front of you, all of those preconceived notions can be challenged. And I've actually had friends who have had a lot of preconceived notions, many misinformed, and been like kind of stunned and be like, wait a second, you're not this, this, and this. Like, who are you?
Right.
You know, and you're not wanting that much. Okay, wow. Maybe I have to resort that, right? So, being in front of somebody and being in relationship is vastly different from conjuring up images, which are kind of fear-based stories that
Mm.
one tells oneself. So, once you get into a relationship with someone, it actually becomes much easier. It's really like this person has stated it. Thank goodness they've clarified it. I don't have to guess or wonder.
Mm-hmm.
They've told me, and here I am going to make my best effort. This person likely is going to be okay with some mistakes as I learn it, right? Like and it because sometimes people like think that all trans people are going to be mad at one mistake
Right.
forever and a day, and it's like, no, that doesn't generally happen. you know
Yeah.
um, and this is somebody you care about, and so you're motivated. And so I think humans are wired for that relational empathy, and it does trump this abstraction or this reasoning that we sometimes get into when we don't have a trans or non-binary person in front of us, or if we're doing it online, right? We
Mm.
can get into these dynamics, and it's just like, well, let's try it in front of each other, and let's try to get past some of that fear-based thinking.
Mm-hmm. As you were speaking, I just remembered a comment that we received on our YouTube account that I want to read out, or I'll put it on the screen as well for
Mm,
those watching. But if you're listening, I'll read it out because it's such a good example of this.
mm,
Which is somebody said, "I'm here because I googled what do trans people think about Dave Chappelle's jokes, because
mm,
I've heard a lot of people not from the community giving their thoughts, including the clown comments above." uh, to hear I just wish they were more original, which is what Kai and I said, is
mm,
way different to what the news says.
mm.
And that's so true that
Yep.
there's this idea that trans and non-binary people will feel a certain way. And so therefore I'm going to respond from that. And you haven't ever spoken to a trans person.
Mm-mm. Yeah. And there's many different responses, most of them pretty reasonable, right?
Mm.
And, or I would say pretty much all of them, or vast majority. And so, yeah, it's really important. And that's such a good example. I'm glad you brought that forward because, and that kudos to that person for kind of fact
Yeah.
checking it too. Most people just kind of have a thought and they're like, yeah, that's true, without checking it.
Mm-hmm.
With people who are themselves a part of the community, right? So, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Um, so I have two questions that are just in my head now.
Yeah.
If I've missed something, let me know. But the
Uh-huh.
first question that I have is for cis people listening: what should they be doing when they hear, or if they hear, one trans person dismissing
Mhm.
another trans person or non-binary person's needs
Mhm.
in this way that we've been talking about? Because that would
Yeah.
be, I would imagine, really hard to handle.
Oh, yeah. People shy away from that. They're like, "That's an inter-community thing, and y'all
Yeah.
sort it out. Leave me out of it. Get
Yeah.
back to me when you're done,"
Mm-hmm.
and kind of walk away, right? And I
Mm-hmm.
understand that hesitation, especially if somebody is new to the
For sure.
discussion or the issues. You don't wanna kinda get into deep waters that you're unfamiliar with. Um, but if somebody is saying, it's one thing if people are speaking from their own experience, that's their experience, right? And we don't
Mm-hmm.
need to, you know, uh, manage that at all, right? So it's more
Yeah.
when people start to talk about other people's experiences, especially in a negative way or in a way that's controlling of them, to be
Mm-hmm.
like, you know what? I hear, it's kind of summarizing what they're saying, not to agree with it necessarily, but more just to say you're hearing them, right? Because oftentimes,
Mm-hmm.
if we don't hear them, people will continue to repeat the same thing, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
people do want to be heard. Um, And we can frame it within, this is a concern, right, that they're raising. And then just to be curious, like, is there anything underneath that, what else might be there for you, that's at play? Like, what are you worried about happening? And kind of get them to play out the tape, because sometimes they can start to see, and then like they can see their own kind of like, oh yeah, that's maybe not the reality of it, or maybe I'm overstating it. And if
Mm-hmm.
they don't see that, then you can say, actually, that's not my experience of the community, even if you've had a limited one. To be like, I've seen different things related to that. I mean, we'd have to have an example to go through it, but you know what I mean? Just getting people to think it through. And you don't have to have all the answers either, right?
Mm-hmm.
But just a counterpoint to say, actually, that's not my experience. And if you have a specific example, then to bring that into, because that kind of allows that to function as a bit of a counterpoint, a
Mm-hmm.
weight against where this person is headed. And you may not resolve this entirely for that person, but I
Mm-hmm.
think these are important seeds that get planted, that then later, with some additional watering and other people talking, will maybe open things up for that person.
For sure. My last question then is sort of on the other side of this, is what would you say to someone who has, like a trans or non-binary person who has been made to feel like they are too much by the very people that they hoped would understand?
Yeah. I mean, the thing that I want to say to them is that we have their back, right? We're here
Mm.
working at Transfocus and, with other organizations and other people in the community, that the few that do think that way are not, like, there's more people than that are in support of folks than there are who are looking down on them or
Mm-hmm.
controlling them or saying is too much, right? I know it's hard to lose sight of that because
Mm-hmm.
those voices can be quite loud, or seem
Mm-hmm.
louder, especially online. But there is enough space. We have to widen the circle. And we are capable of it as
Mm-hmm.
human beings. It might take a few steps to get there, but it is definitely not asking for too much. And in some cases, I would say we're asking for too little. Like,
Agreed. For
it's
sure.
like, sometimes when I think about it, I'm like, we're asking for very basic things.
Yeah.
Pronouns, names. Like, we're not asking that a huge statue of gold be made of us, like, that's next on the agenda, by the way.
Yeah,
No,
exactly.
like, we are, you know, and we're asking for healthcare and,
Yeah.
etc. But so I appreciate why people get nervous when they hear others respond in that way, and they can feel self-conscious and like, oh, maybe I shouldn't. And
Mm.
to the degree people feel safe to ask for things, I understand that takes time too to get there. But I would invite folks to connect with people who do support them in that journey and to go for the things that they need and want in a stepwise manner that is safe for them.
Mm-hmm. For sure. Well, thank you so much, Kai. I think
Mhm.
this is a really interesting one, and one that maybe cis people might not realize is at play. So I think
Mhm.
it's really important that we talked about it.
Yeah.
And thank you so much.
Thank you. It was really good to talk about it, and I hope you have a good rest of your day.
Thank you, you too. I'll see you. Bye.
Bye.